Hi, Ron. In this lesson, what we're going to be doing is looking at if statements. So if statements are one of those things that you will use a lot in JavaScript, as with any programming language. And basically, they're really important because it allows you to run code when you want to run code when certain conditions are fulfilled. Okay, so to get on to doing that, the first thing we want to introduce is the concept of Boolean values. So Boolean values are another type of value which is inherent in using if statements. So a Boolean value, which you would have seen in other programming languages we've taught, is basically a true or a false value. Okay, so for example, if we put in our console.log, okay, in our script, okay, and let's say we put 3 is greater than 5. Now, in that case, because we're putting in a mathematical function, this like that, it's not doing a calculation, it's basically doing an evaluation between two values. So 3, as we know, is not greater than 5, so the answer to that would be false. So when we run run the actual code, so we go over here and we go across. Now you'll see that, and I've opened up before I started the web page already with the console open. So if you don't remember how to do that, you can use, and we might just do that quickly. So if you have your web page and then you just go down to inspect and open it up, you'll be able to see the console. Now you'll see that I've returned the value false. So that's a Boolean value. So essentially, in that particular piece of code, what I'm doing is basically a logical thing saying it's either true or it's false. So if I was to make it 6 is greater than 5 and save it and run it again, I'm going to get a true value. So that's what a Boolean value is. Now we can just as easily assign that to a variable. So for example, if we said let's value equal 6 greater than 5, we can print the value, and I better put in a semicolon at the end of it, we can print that value on the screen. So basically you can assign variable values to a variable, and it doesn't change the value at all. So if I was to change it back to 3 over 5 and try again, what I should get in my console is false. Okay, so that's basically a condition. Now within the conditions, there are a few different types of comparison operators is what they refer to. So that's referred to as a comparison operator. So the ones that are fairly common, and this is all on the web page for this particular video, is we've got a greater than, and then there would be less than, and then there will also be less than and equal to, and of course greater than and equal to would also be all logical operators that can be used for evaluation purposes. Now the other one that is a little less intuitive is the equals. So when you're doing the equals like that, you need to have 3 equal signs. Okay, so if you want to say is this value, so if it's 3 equal to 5, we should, if I run it again, we should get a false on the screen there. Okay, so if I was to then change that to 5 equals 5, I would get a true, or I should get a true, and I've forgotten to save it. Hang on. Save. We'll go back to our screen here, and it becomes true. Okay, so that's basically the basic operations. Now there's one other thing we want to show you, which is that if I, for example, take this concept and I say, well, I'm going to evaluate a number versus a string, even though, so as soon as you put talking marks around that, basically you're saying, even though it's a numeric value, that is a number, I'm actually converting it into a string. Now, if I do that, and I then rerun my code, even though the characters are identical, because they're not of the same type, you'll get a false number. Okay. Now, one of the additional comparison operators, which I think is unique to JavaScript, is a double equal sign. And what that does is that it basically converts the values into the same type of variable, so both into string, I think it is, and then when I put that, then they view them as true. So this is just a useful thing that might come up from time to time. So if you want an absolute are these equal, are these exactly the same, then you're going to put in 3 equal signs. And if you want are the characters that are used the same, then you want it to return true, then you would use 2 equals. So basically they're the equals operations, okay? And obviously we need to know those in order to be able to then use an if statement. Okay, so on to if statements. So if statements, we just need to know firstly the structure. So I'm going to start by firstly creating a value, and I'm just we'll make this value as a const. So const should be what's already set, and we're just going to give it the name number, and we're going to give it the value of 10 just for the moment. Now we're going to use that within our if statements in a moment. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is if we want to create an if statement, the syntax is if, okay, and then we have 2 normal brackets, okay, and this is where you would place the condition, okay. If that condition is fulfilled, if it's true, okay, then what we can do is we can run some code, and we need our squiggly or curly brackets to be able to run that condition. So for example, if I just want to say console log it is true, okay, and then if we change the condition, instead of using, just to keep it nice and simple at this stage, if I want to just put in true, which is if you write it in lowercase, because it is a case-sensitive language, it views that as being a Boolean value. So it's basically saying that condition, whatever it is true, and then it will print that value. Okay. So if I click save now and go to here, what happens? It is true. So it's printing that value because it's true. Okay. Now, if I wanted to add an additional condition, there are 2 ways to do it. One is an else if, and so what that means is we're putting in another specific condition. Okay, so we're going to just put in false for the moment, and we'll put again our curly brackets. So the actual syntax is fairly simple. Okay, and we'll put in another console. Okay, and we're going to put in log it is false. Okay, so now what we have is we have 2 pieces of code here. Now, but they've got 2 conflicting conditions. Okay, so if the conditions are not met, then it won't run the code. So in this case, if I run save, you'll see it's still running it is true, but this particular piece of code is not being run because the condition here is not true. But if I was to run it, do it the other way and say, well, my condition that I was going to run this code on is now false, and I run that as true, what's then going to happen is it's going to run the it is false code. And you'll see on your thing, it's now saying it is false. Okay, so that's basically how it works. Now, the other type of condition that you can use is just else. So, for example, you might be looking for one particular condition. For example, if you're picking a jumper in a store, and let's say the only color you want is red, is it red? True. And then you can have something like it is red. If it's any other color, so you might have the variable saying what color is it? It's black. Okay, and you might have it's not the color I want. Okay, so else is different to else if, because else covers every other event that's possible. Now you can also have multiple events, so it's fairly similar to what's in VBA with case statements, where you can have multiple conditions in there if whatever the next condition is, and then the next piece of code. Okay, so now if we start to combine this with some actual numbers, so let's say we want to put in, let's say we want to have a number, so that's our variable up the top there, and we want to say is greater than, we'll say greater than and equal to 10, it's true. And if we want our number is less than or equal to 10, then we want to run a different result. So we might say greater than 10 or less than 10. Okay, I've forgotten to put a little mark on the end of that too. Okay, so now if we run our code, oh, we've got some sort of thing we're not happy about. So let's have a quick look. Else if something's not right. I've forgotten to put in talking marks at the end. I think that should fix it. Okay, there you go. So it's greater than or equal to 10. I should put equal to 10. Okay, so if I change that number now, and this just really demonstrates it. So let's say I now make it 8, so it's now less than 10. I rerun my code, we're saving it and going back, it's now giving you less than 10. So that's pretty much how an if statement works. Okay, so if we and in the last thing we're going to cover is what's called logical operations. Okay, so what logical operations are is that sometimes there's more than one condition we want to evaluate in order to decide yes, we're going to go ahead with the doing a certain action. So for example, if we use the example of the jumper in a store, let's say we want it red, and of course it must fit. Okay, so there are two conditions in which would drive us to buy it. One is the color we want, red, and the fact that it fits. Now the way that gets structured is using a logical operation. Okay, so the way the logical operations work is that if we have true, and a double and between it, and we also have true, what that's basically saying is that's an and value. So it's essentially saying there's two conditions in which we need to fulfill in order for the code to run. So okay, and I'm going to make this greater than 12 so the other code doesn't run. Okay, so just so it makes a bit more sense, both conditions are true. Okay, and then okay, and I'm not going to bother, but I could put in a different message saying only one condition is true. Now, if I run my code again, basically what it's then saying is, right, both conditions are true, and if I was to change one of them to false, okay, and then run it now, okay, what I should see is there's nothing there, and the reason there's nothing there is because that overall condition, which requires both conditions to be true, is not fulfilled, so therefore the code does not run. Okay, now these can be replaced with, instead of just me putting in a straight Boolean value, I could put in a number evaluation. So, for example, I might say number equals 12 and true. Okay, or I could put in a variable, whatever it is I want to run. You can just replace them to be able to do what you want to be able to do. So that's basically an AND statement. So if I run that now, so both are true, it should. Whoops, and I've done something wrong. What have I done wrong? Something. Not sure what the something is. Don't know what the something is. Oh, running for me. Not sure why. Okay, but basically that's how it works. Now the other logical operation that we do is an OR. Okay, so the OR symbol, so it works exactly the same way as what we've just talked about, except that we have a couple of is that the symbol is just two upright lines like that. So that key is usually just above the enter key on the right hand side of your keyboard. So that is what's called an OR operation. So that means that only one of these two conditions need to be correct in order for the overall statement to be considered true or false. Okay, so both conditions are true. Now, by the way, a few minutes ago, I was having trouble running the code. Now, this is a good example of, and I didn't bother trying to fix it, but this is a good example of, because I've changed the expression I had there and there, that tells me that the area where there was something wrong with the code is in that area. So this sort of using console log to check certain things to see is it returning what I want is a really important part of being able to make sure you can get the code to do what it wants. But that's a side anyway. Okay, and then the last one is we've done and, we've done or, and the last one is not. Okay, so not means that is just an exclamation mark at the front of the code. So for example, we're basically saying your condition is not false, so it's true, so therefore it will run the code. Okay, so if I run it now, it will run the, oops, didn't run for me. So, sorry. Okay, so it's run the code. Now if I put true in, so it's saying it's not true, so therefore it must be false. If I run the thing, you will get no code coming up. So that's pretty much the three operators. Now all of these operators are on the, so you don't have to remember them, but as you use this code more and more frequently, you'll get used to it. But basically, that's all on the website, so you can always refer back to that if you've forgotten how to do it when we get to the next thing. Okay, so complete the exercise at the end of the page, and good luck, and we'll catch you in the next lesson.